Durocher with USC, AVIT Solutions Architect.
Chi Hang No, I'm the data analyst
Okay, great.
with the AVIT teams.
So for us at USC, how are we using data and why is it important to us? So what we'll talk about here is how we've been using data to better inform our services, improve our operational efficiencies, enhance our user experience through the design and the data that we obtain, giving us roadmaps for that, and to gain all important stakeholder buy-in. Those are some of the top line strategy pieces of how we're using our data currently. With data, you always really want to start with what questions is it you really want to ask and why do you want to ask those questions? That's an important place to start, and that will frame a lot of your data gathering and your understanding where you're going to want to get your data points. The questions we wanted to ask and so getting some big answers are, what can we learn about our technologies? What can we learn about our spaces? What can we learn specifically about our users? How can we be more predictive in understanding the space of technology users, what the people are doing in them? And really importantly, what are our common service items and the tickets that are generated? And how does that impact all these other areas that we're talking about here? So last year in Sound Contractor News, there was a big article here on big data, big business. I don't know if anybody here caught it, but it's the beginning of what we're seeing as a revolution. And downstairs, I'll drop a couple of these off to y'all. This was down in the magazine rack, and there's an article in here called Data Lake. And it's a really interesting reading, and it tracks with what we're going to be talking about here today. And I suggest, just from a reading perspective, we'll put a copy on each table here and then find this downstairs, and it'll give you some useful insights. So this topic of data, especially within our realm and our universe, is becoming really critical. Analytics transforms AV/IT integration services was what this article is about. And still today, how our industry is using data is at its infancy, really. So the technology environment that we've developed at USC is a networked AV/IT infrastructure, making sure that we have scalable technologies. We developed a centralized operations management model, and we've conducted annual refreshes. I've been at the USC for, I'm going on 18 years. And so we have the opportunity of having the long view on what we've done and where we're going. And we'd like to consider that the work that we did in the early 2000s was very, very innovative and important in developing the baseline infrastructure that's needed to talk about data today. So the data environment that we're supporting is, how do we leverage data to improve our space and technologies? What kind of insights do we get from the data that gives us cues? Chi and I are the primary designers for the university's general use classrooms. So we do the architecture, we do the project management, so we conduct all of the phases of refreshing our learning spaces along with our team. What can we learn about our technology use patterns to be innovative, current, yet still support the legacy technologies that data tells us we still must support? What insights can we derive from our service ticketing data? What trends and patterns do we see, and how does that relate to other data points? How can we better inform our services, our operations, our overall user experience? And really, how do we better inform our own CIOs and our own management, which can I see by a show of hands, how many people here have an AV organization that falls into under IT? Okay. So what we know in our world is that the IT organizations sometimes tend to have a difficulty in understanding our language. And so if we can come up with understanding what is the Rosetta Stone for AV to communicate effectively, for us, we feel that that's data. That's language that they understand. It's language that they can relate to. And so it's a way that we can translate what we do very meaningfully for them. Who uses the data? So in our organization especially, we want to make sure it's actionable at all levels, whether it's the operations level, meaning the team in the field, understanding some of the dynamics of the equipment and the use patterns and the maintenance and support, At the management level, our director looking at some of these patterns and understanding, hey, somebody's could be doing their job better, or there's an issue here, and we may need to look at some funding down the road. So it allows middle management to really understand what's going on in the organization. And for us specifically, data has been extraordinarily valuable at the executive level for strategic planning. And it really has been the basis for what's allowed us to do some of the work that we're doing today. Data and the analytics of this data, it empowers the organizations to deliver the targeted operational efficiencies, services, and improving customer experience. At the end of the day, everybody in this room, we're all about developing exceptional user experiences. Really, that's our jobs. And we do that through painting the spaces and painting the technology, but at the end of the day, if it's not delivering exceptional user experiences for the environments that we work in, what's the point? Making meaning of the data. What questions arise from your data? How do you identify underlying issues from interpreting your data? And how can you use customer stories to make their experience better? How do you qualify and quantify your data and map all these pieces together to really tell you a story? Again, data is storytelling. It just provides you the language by which to weave and craft your story. So we're going to just give you a quick background about our backstory, how we got where we got at USC, what our general universe looks like. We service 5,000 classes, events per week, about 40,000 events per year, over 21 buildings, 200 plus classrooms, auditoria, computing labs. We've developed a technology called the MOMS, which we'll go into in a while here, and that allows us to split and load balance our offices for support, and we also have the health science campus that we support. So we try to leverage remote technologies to help us service and support distant organizations. So this is an overview of our University Park campus. So how do you look at deploying technology when this is your universe, when it's a very vast enterprise, multiple buildings, old buildings, new buildings, buildings in between? How do you service and support an organization like this, especially providing exceptional user experience and making sure you're getting staff where they need to be without an exponential growth in your staff as your organization grows? So in our world, this is a snapshot of the types of spaces, the activities, the technologies, and all of these are happening simultaneously. So how do you look at supporting, and what does data tell you about, you look into a space and you see we support 200 spaces and there's all this activity going on at any one time. What do you do with this? How do you make sense of what's going on here? So we have the MOMS, which is the Multimedia Operations Management System that we developed at USC. It's a centralized remote support system. We have cameras in all of our classroom, along with Genetec and Linnell on the doors. We have cameras. We have all of our IoT devices. We have two-way communications. When I developed MOMS back in 2001, it was based on the theory that I can identify your problem probably before you can identify you even have a problem, just by watching what's going on. What are your actions? What are you doing? Is a person fussing like this, looking at a laptop and technology? And if so, how do we call in and say, hi, professor, I see you might need some assistance here, before we deploy human resources that may need to come from across campus? So how do we leverage centralized support mechanisms and virtual presence to maximize the enterprise scale and scope of our organization? Again, we have multiple zones. These are snapshots of our support offices. And what you'll notice here in this top, that doesn't work that great. In this top one is we have student workers. We employ our student workers. We created our MOMS environment that's based on a situational awareness framework, SA, really. And it's really about how do you monitor a vast environment, so many cameras? How do you look for cues and opportunities to assist and support proactively and not waiting to be reactive? And so we train our student staff on multiple levels, not only in the monitoring and support on the back end, but the idea is if we can support people by watching what they're doing and speaking to them, 90% of our problems can be fixed without deploying a human resource. But as we all know, there comes a point where you can ask a couple of questions, and at some point it's like, deploy a resource, right? So you got somebody on the way while you're still trying to assist them because you've identified there might be something you can't fix. And so it allows us to really do load balancing of distribute our staff where it's needed and when it's needed based on the academic cadence of the day, where parts on campus are way more busy than others. And the remote troubleshooting component of it has been extraordinarily valuable for us, leveraging Global Viewer Enterprise and all the other technologies that we have out there. But for us in our world, the AV backbone is a portion of what we do. We're actually, if you think about it, they look to us for furniture, the environment in the room. If the room is too hot, they don't usually call facilities. They see an AV person and say, my room's too hot. The trash is too much in this room. So AV oftentimes is the central key point for user experience above every other trade in a campus. I tried to make this argument not too long ago at an executive level, and it was really interesting the reaction that I received when I suggested that the AV people in the field probably have more of a touch point experience of our users than anybody in the entire IT organization. Because we're on campus, we're talking to the customers, the students, we're interfacing with them, we're understanding how they work, how they move in a very nuanced way that few see. So we have way more power than folks realize. Data will really help us to translate that power into a meaningful way. So what we've done, LE means Learning Environments, that's the group that we support. When I started in 2001, I began an IoT infrastructure. And I had been working with Accenture. 9/11 happened, got laid off, went to USC, saw an environment that had no technology in it. So my approach was, how do we leverage this new thing called IT and some IT connectivity with AV devices? In 2001, these were really radical, still new concepts. So when I got hired at USC and pointed in a direction that said, go do something without a real clear what to do, we started working immediately on our mom's platform in a one building that connected 5 auditoria and a number of classrooms to do our virtual present remote management, and we used that as a prototypical baseline that then worked to expand on our campus. So we then developed the MOMS, and we launched it formally in 2003, where we went from, the goal was, we currently, we all have who here uses student workers, by the way? Valuable resource, right? They are sometimes how we can function with what we're being asked to do, given the time and the space and the environment. So they're really important. So we started really working with our student workers, but we recognized having a lot of students out there creates other problems, and how you train and support, and especially student workers. We have a lot of foreign and international student workers. They come and go, and it's really difficult to keep training folks. And so if we can come up with a system that allows us to specialize some of our students, leverage that, we can also reduce our student worker count. We initiated our data architecture in 2004. That's an important point. Today, a lot of people are talking about big data, big data, big data. The reality is, you got to go under the hood, and there is infrastructure to get you where you need to be. And oftentimes, that's a hard sell strategically for us. And so I feel very fortunate that we've had a very long opportunity to develop our infrastructure that's going to lead to what we're talking about here today. And so in 2006 is when we really started our AV-IT data collection. We started with our Global Viewer Enterprise first and foremost, which is the universe that we control. I could envision data from other people all over the place, but if you think getting space from people is difficult, try getting their data. We won't talk about policy, we won't talk about governance, we won't really talk about legal here, but those are really important factors in this discussion as well. So we started in 2006 with an AV collection process. Well, you'll notice there's a gap between 2006 and 16. We gathered a lot of data, we built our infrastructure, and in around 2016, we really started looking at our data really heavily and realized it was crap. And there's nothing worse than trying to fix old, bad data. It's almost Well, we threw it out. We started from scratch, really. But it was an important benchmark for us to recognize that the quality of your data is key. So in 2016, we really refined that model, and in 2018, we formally produced a data architecture project that got funded by our provost office, which is currently a 3-year strategic plan, and we'll see where that goes due to other challenges on our campus at this time. And in 2019 here, we're now starting to bring in some expanded capabilities based on what we're talking about. So as you can see for us, a data infrastructure, understanding big data and working with it started a decade ago. Any questions at this point? Yes.
Do we have access to the slides or the video afterwards?
Yes. Yes. I believe access to the video for elite and premier members of AVEXA, and I believe slides to participants. Yes. I'm sorry, you had your hand up first.
Would you go into more depth into your mom system in terms of the data reporting and also the backend system that you're running?
Yes. So really, our moms doesn't collect a lot of data right now. We have, how many cameras do we have?
We have, because we have 200 classrooms, so we probably have about 300 cameras.
Yeah,
because
but
each different room have they
Yeah.
have multiple cameras. So I think that right now, because we just capture the video information, I think the next step we try to using video analytics to kind of break down the information to be numerical numbers, and then we can do analysis.
Yeah, so right now we're not collecting data from our visuals yet, because there's policy and governance issues with that as well. And so we've been asked, for instance, from professors, can I come in, I want to watch a camera, I want to see, I think students cheated. And we said, absolutely not. These are service and support cameras. All of our cameras are pointed at the service area. They cannot be used for anything else. But the side benefit is, we do live in downtown Los Angeles. Our cameras have caught, assault, robberies. I've been at USC since 2001, lost 3 projectors. Of those 3 projectors, 2 were returned.
Do you collect any data from the IoT devices?
Yes.
Yeah, we do.
And what backend system are you using for that?
Yeah, we're currently using Global Viewer Enterprise, but we're moving into a Fusion environment as well. So we're collecting our AV data through Global Viewer Enterprise, and as we'll talk about as we get into the workshop area, we'll use that as our control data set, the one data set that we in this room control. We may not control academic calendaring, HVAC data, scheduling data, all these other data sets. We control one important piece of control data, and if you're at least running your Global Viewer Enterprise and you're clean in that environment, it serves as a really great platform to be able to get other data from folks. Yes? Yes, we do. Well, the support desks are those moms' offices that I showed you. So each zone supports certain areas of the campus. The help phones, we have these Viking K1700-3 help phones in our classrooms. Vandal resistant, we can call into rooms, a light turns on, there's no ringing. So it allows us to have some two-way communication when needed without, the thing about cameras in classrooms is they're only a problem if you're recording audio and video simultaneously. So as long as we're recording video, and when we do need to talk to the customers, we have a portal to do so, we've met our objective.
So you guys have like a ticketing system?
Yes, we're using ServiceNow, and we'll talk about that in a minute here. Any other questions?
What's the size of your team? Like how many professional staff, how many students?
So really, the campus has developed, Chi and I.
Yes. For the
it.
design team, we only have 2 staffs, yeah.
We do all the
But
design,
for the support team,
development, all the project management, really. We're working with other people. We've designed all of the data architecture ourselves. But then on the learning environments team that is out, the bodies out in the field, there's 12 what we call specialist support managers. I hate to say, we currently have about 150 students that they're operating, but that was because of a business model that was brought in that somebody said, no, I want to flood the environment with students. But the model, when I created it, was supported with 30 students. So how do we leverage the remote technologies in order to get what we need? So it can vary between how you want to run your model. But from a perspective of, we're already looking at the way that it was intended because there's some tremendous cost savings, and we're all looking at those things now for salary lines. So our data mission was strategic planning through the use of data gathered from human intelligence, along with IoT and other sources for use in design, operations, and support. That was our mission statement we started with. A basic on our spaces, our auditoria are not all too different than a lot of environments. We don't design for our classrooms and our auditoria. We don't do intense active learning spaces. We're doing general ed environment. We serve the bell curve in the middle, the 90% of the folks. Those that require extensive technology use, there are other spaces at USC for that, and often it's, whether it's through Marshall Business School or the School of Engineering, we're a very federated campus, but we support the general ed environment. So we make sure that we have standards based in all of our auditoria in classrooms. We design all the furniture components as well, working along with our capital construction, podiums, just about anything you can imagine. From our classroom side, so this is what our typical classroom looks like. Too many chairs, nothing really special here. But for us, what's special is our technology housing that we designed and developed. It looks like a simple box, and in a lot of ways it is. But why it was developed was data showed us that we were spending, whenever we wanted to put our baseline technology in a classroom, our capital construction, facilities, engineering, there was a large premium on top of what we do to get in our technology. So we said, how can we get our technology in a room that eliminates the pain points of all the different trades? So we developed this box that essentially is a stackable box that is put on the wall with 2 sticks of Unistrut, and everything runs plenum behind it, and all we need on the wall at 42 to center is a data and a power. And so we've eliminated needing to bring in facilities. The capital construction just needs to give us a clean wall. We've eliminated bringing in electricians except for providing us the power and data. And it's eliminated our having to nuance every single install. So this has served us as really well, and it's a stackable box. So it's a weight-bearing, load-bearing box, so it doesn't have any impact on the walls. So, and it can be moved from time to time. The other important thing about this box for us is that it houses all of our key technology, which serves as our data gathering platform, provide a simple user interface within our data-driven architecture. Our mission is to make sure that for the general spaces, no matter where you go on campus, the experience should be exactly the same for every professor. So we do a level of continuity and consistency in our technology. We also support mixed-use spaces. This is one that we just finished at a historical building, the Doheny Memorial Library. Our challenge was really interesting when we were given this project. We were given a proposal. It said, designers came up with $1 million proposal to do this room. Do that, but you have 100,000. So we basically did the best that we could working with a collaborative team. What you can't really tell in this picture here is that we have a main presentation area, we have a museum environment that goes around the room, and on the side wall we have a separate and discrete video conferencing environment. So this room was, how do we serve many masters and still get the space done in the time frame that we needed, in the budget that we needed. So we're supporting not just LE spaces, but Chi and I really designed for the university-wide. In general, we're consultants for the Provost Office, so our scope really bleeds beyond learning environments. We've integrated scheduling panels, digital signage for the museum piece. We're bringing in capture platforms into our environment, and again, it's centrally supported and monitored. So this just shows you our scheduling panel. We have multiple cameras. We have our side conferencing environment and a front presentation environment. And we had a really great little piece here because we were all trying to figure out how to do this space. We couldn't install anything on the ceilings, on the walls, nothing at the back. So how do you get a projector in this environment? So we created this great little platform down beneath the projector, and we put Sony's new 6,000 lumen 4K LED projector, and it serves in the room. It's like a showpiece. It's got a nice piece of glass over the top of it. And so that was our best way that we could, still integrating the technology and not disturb the historical space. So those are the challenges, we all have in this room of every day of whether it's a new build and we're consulting from a new build perspective, or someone says, here's a 200-year-old building, what can you do in it? So our challenges are quite the spectrum. Our IoT device architecture, it's standardized, it's simple, it's low maintenance, and it's scalable. Right, so it kind of just shows you a basic roadmap. We don't do anything extraordinarily challenging because we don't need to. The most important thing is delivering exceptional experiences back to 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 back, 5 to 7 days a week. Data streams. Your data streams coming in from your IoT data, they've got to be clean, meaningful, and actionable. What do you do when you have all this data flooding you? How do you make sense of this data? What's it telling you? So we're going to talk about our architecture roadmap, how we got to where we are, and where we're going to go from here. So this is our current map of our infrastructure. Down below, you can see this is a map of all of our devices that we support. Those that moves up into our control system environment. So on one side is our AV control, and on the other side is our Genetec, which reflects our mom's platform. Genetec is a security and access control platform, and we do work along with our Department of Public Safety in this endeavor. So we can lock the classrooms, we just can't lock the building. So we can lock and unlock classrooms, we can talk to people in our rooms, we can control all of their devices. At the next level, we have our group level. So you can see we have LE, so we support the learning environments, but now we're also supporting the provost's office and some of their rooms, and we're starting to support other schools. So the typical problem other schools have is they say, how do you guys do what you do? I don't know, how do you help us? What we're all trying to figure out is how we leverage as a service, our service and support model for the schools that can't afford to bring in the support services that we're able to afford. So that's a process that we're working on now, is leveraging and expanding how we deliver our services. Then we're at the server and the switch level. And then from the service and switch level is all of our building, our service analytics, all that. So you can see it starts at the bottom with our IoT infrastructure and it moves up through our architecture. Any questions about the architecture? It's fairly simple, and I don't think it's complicated. However, it's going to be different for everybody in their environment. The data points that we're looking at, so here are our data points. We're looking at D-Tools, which is an integration platform. We have building information, we have room information, reservation scheduling, lecture capture platform information, all of our IoT device information, project management information, budgeting information, construction management, staff scheduling. These are the data points that Chi worked on mapping out that you can see here. It's a scary looking map. What the key though is you have to find a key to all this data. What's the key that's going to bring this all together? In our environment, what we selected as the key was the room number is the nomenclature, the building and room, how we do at USC is the nomenclature, and so that's going to be our key. So for instance, our Taper Hall building is THH, and a room might be Taper 103. So let's make sure we use the nomenclature. It has to be accurate in all data sets. Okay? So now you look at our data points from external sources that we've been looking at, so this kind of hones in. We're working right now with Ad Astra for our classroom scheduling reservations. We have all of our GVE data, which is the only data that we technically control that's in our purview. We're bringing in ServiceNow, which is our ticketing system, and our D-Tools and other platforms that we're using for tracking our project management and our project cycles and our builds and how we do what we do. Any questions on the data piece? Yes?
You mentioned staff scheduling. What are you using for that?
For staff scheduling right now, they're using an internal application that was developed, and that's going to be changing. I think Workday is going to replace what they're doing, but if anybody here is using Workday, we have another 18 years of work to do, let's just say, is where it comes down to. So yeah, bringing in the staff scheduling is going to become really important for us as well. So on the data, once you have sort of that architecture, you have all of your data, you move into the next part, which is, we know we have our IoT data, Y'all have different sources of data out there. It's different for everybody. How do you stitch the data together? How do you visualize the data? That's the modeling, that's the centerpiece here that really becomes your Rosetta Stone. All the other pieces are what we do day in and day out, but our challenge is communicating that upwards to people that don't necessarily understand our language. So now we're going to show you a couple of our dashboards, and we're going to move into somewhat of a little exercise here for y'all. So deriving useful insights from data, that's really what we're here to talk about and what we're going to do some play with in a little while to help you all think through how you might do this in your own organizations and as teams. So right now we're deriving our insights as we're still building our strategic plan. We have our classroom information, we have our AV usage, and we have our service tickets. We've mapped out all these other data points that we want to gather, but honestly, some of that has been show me what you're doing with the data sets that you've got and prove that we can trust you with our data and you'll get our data. So what we're finding is that as we're starting to demonstrate and illustrate to others what we've been doing with our data, honestly, most people internally are blown away because they don't, especially the data teams that work for IT, because we're a trade that is not always under the radar, we're under the radar, I should say. And so they don't always know what we're working on. And we're really advanced in data in ways that they don't quite yet see. And so what we've been wanting to do is really make sure that we build our foundation of trust with what we have and demonstrate what we can do with that. And that's going to allow for expandability of that data. Our usage data. We're enterprise monitoring. We're using it for reporting and analytics and for maintenance and operational insights. Really what we want to do with this day today is make this an insights workshop. How do you gather insights? How do you derive insights from data? Not just the data itself. The data is just data. It's not really useful unless you know what you're going to do with it and how you might bring it together. These are just snapshots of our dashboards, which we'll go into in a little bit more detail coming up. So our AV input usage was one real specific example I can show you of how important our data was. So this is a dashboard that illustrates our real-time monitoring of our input usage. It shows us our user trends, patterns, and we're able to get insights. To give you an example of why this is important, on the left is what our data in this area looked like before we moved down our strategic plan that was funded to say, we need to look at the data that we've got and what's it telling us, and it's not clean. On the before shows you what data looks like when it wasn't as clean and ready to go. It doesn't give you a lot of important data points. On the right, you can see how much data we're getting from it. It shows us what she will demonstrate is this shows you what input is being used, how much in what building. And so it really gives you this great opportunity for us. We presented a project to our provost office that said, we need funding because we have evidence to show that our users now need different cable types. The VGA is not being used anymore. What's missing? We correlated with service tickets, and what we found was that, which cable did we add, Chi? Was it the
USB-C,
USB-C
and mini display port. And then also, as you see this, this diagram, you can see that the information is more clear so that we can break down to different buildings. And then also we can validate some projects we implement over last summer. So for example, we implement the wireless share video transmission technology and also new type of cables. We can see that the usage from time to time, so to see how successful we implement the projects. And also you can see that the need to donut on the right corner. So this we talk about the load balancing. So this is we get more information. We can validate how our AV technology usage per support zoning.
Yeah, so we're doing heat mapping, load balancing, distribution, able to see where to put our efforts. And the great news to this was when we went to our provost office and said we need funding for that project, we provided data to show that we need it. When we went in to validate at the end and said, here's what we did with your money, we show this data as part of our data sets leading to what our ask is for next year. I will say that we've truncated our provost funding ask from 3 to 6 months to a week, maybe. And oftentimes it's the day that we walk in with our presentation, we show data. There's not a lot of dialogue afterwards, really. The dialogue afterwards is, why aren't we doing this for more spaces? Gee, this gives us a lot of important information. What aren't we capturing? So I think there's some really important, for us, it gives you the currency by which to get what you need and get other asks. Yes?
What kind of data did you see the most return on in terms of time invested and kind of capturing that data? What kind of data did you see the most results from? You mentioned that previously you didn't see what inputs were being used.
Yes.
So when you were able to kind of granularly expand and see exactly what cable type was being used.
Yes.
What type of that data was more instrumental?
Yes, well, that's a really great question, and this moves towards the question of both qualitative and quantitative data, right? So we look at the data and said, well, that's interesting. What does that really mean? And so what we found with our inputs was, for instance, we saw in one building there was still a very high use of VGA from our data, and we're like, well, that doesn't really make any sense. What we did is we went and then talked to the users about the data, and what we found was that no, the anthropology department had given all their users the Mac laptop that didn't have HDMI, so they were using converters to convert from VGA to HDMI, right? So by the data itself didn't tell us that information. It was a little bit of both. It was looking at the classroom scheduling data, of looking at the data, what's going on there, who are the users in that. Oh, let's go talk to those users and see if we can understand their story. Why are you doing that? So the data itself will tell you that. You have to use the data to help you figure out how to get to the point of answering your question. So that was a really important piece for us because it showed us the importance of having your data, but also quantifying and qualifying your data in a way and getting the backstory for your data to give you that support.
And also, as a data collection perspective, as much as data you can collect is more benefit for your team. Even though the information we talk about is 2006 to 16, that all the information is not clean, but at some point I still can see some value behind it, so that when I do data corrections, let's say I correct the data schema so that I have a very good reference to stack with. So, and then also using VGA is a really perfect example. So as very beginning, we identified that the VGA connection is connected from a lot of Mac machines, right? And then also when we implement, when we look at the check-in and check-out records, we found that a lot of VGA connection actually from the USB-C connections. That's really funny when I found out this information. And then we realized that a lot of professors, they have the newer laptop, that's good, right? But they don't know that they can have using our new USB-C connections to connect to the class. So then we can communicate with the LE team, right? And then they can connect to their user and then give out a proper training to fix the problems.
Yeah, so it really helps you identify gaps in service. But you have to look at the data. You have to examine it, and you have to derive insights and look at correlations.
So, and then in order to make this, find out this insight, we definitely have the AV usage informations, and then space informations, and then also is the service ticket information. This is 3 types of different sources already. Yes.
Yes.
And then we're using data analytics software, and then all this work is done automatically. So as before, I probably need to spend 1 day to kind of get all the information and then run the Excel reports. But right now, we set up a data dashboard, and then we can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, real important. Do we have the input, the connector dashboard here?
Yeah, when we keep going, we will see it.
So impact activity mapping, really important for us to know where is a lot of the activity going, because we distribute students out into the field. So where's our activity really happening, so we can pinpoint where are we sending students, how far might they be traveling. We're even looking at other ideas that said, we'd send our students out with bags, our tech bags. Could we RFD track those bags to understand their patterns? How are they moving through campus? I always like to say, you never know what you're going to get from data. Get your elevator data. I don't know. What are you going to learn from elevator data? You might go, wow, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? I never would have thought that. That's why people are late to class. I see that matched with our registrar's office, there's some folks that might have some disabilities, and so you can start matching questions that you never even thought of by looking from data sets. There's not one piece of data that I think is useless to understanding your environment. It just adds another layer of an important piece of your story. Any questions?
Yeah. Oh, let me give this to you.
I'm just curious if these images, is this DTools what we're looking at here? What is your software?
This is Power BI.
Power BI?
Yes, Microsoft Power BI is the tool that we're using for our data visualization. There's a number of tools out there, whether it's like Power BI, there's Tableau, I know Google's got a tool out there. There's a lot of tools that you can use for data visualization and presentation, really. Yes?
So what told you that they were using, whether they were using VGA or USB-C or HDMI? What software told you that information?
That's coming just through Global Viewer Enterprise. Looking at what we have is we have a cable bundle on the side of our AV wall boxes, and generally they're selecting on an MLC or on a touch panel what they're using that correlates to the cable that they're using. So that's what told us that. And we've been seeing some really interesting information. We saw people, in fact, we have a case that we have to go out and explore because we have somebody converting, right? Isn't that the one that you're talking about? They're converting HDMI to USB-C or?
Oh, yeah. So some of the, let's say because we program all the AV system, A, B, C, D, E is represent VGA, HDMI, mini display port, but sometimes when they bring adapter and then we get the troubles because we cannot collect the actual informations.
Yes.
So, but VGA, we our whole team, everyone have the same spirit. We want to get rid of this, but we do not have a plan right now. So how we make it happen? So data is really helpful. Yeah, we're getting better now. So
yes.
Right at the very beginning, the VGA is the top second input data source, but right now we kind of cut it off to number 4 right now, so hopefully it will be number 6 or number 7 later.
Yeah, because if you can all remember the analog sunset, it was easy for us to make a business case at USC to say no more VHS decks in classrooms because there was an industry standard of sorts that gave us that. But when it comes to removing VGA, for instance, how it's different for everybody. How do we quantify that for us? For us to make the argument that we want to start removing VGA as an input that we support, we really want to support that with data because it's an important piece. Our service ticket information. So this tells us what type of incidents. Our metric that we use is time impacted. So 0 to 5 minutes is what we're striving for as an organization, and anything above that, those are KPIs that are no bueno for our organization. And so, yes? 0 to 5 minutes. Well, when we get a phone call that there's a problem, we're hoping to have 0 to 5 minute impact on the space. That's it. And anything more than that, meaning like we went there, we couldn't solve their problem, the projector just didn't work, they had to cancel their class. We want to have none of those as much as possible. But if it's really, oftentimes it's, a person is futzing, they don't have the right connector, they're wrong cable, they've just done something very simple and it's a very simple correct. And so our ticket types show that. So we can tell you where, what space, what user. Really what we're trying to get at is who's teaching what, where, when, what are they teaching, what space are they in, what technology did they use, did they have any issues with that technology? If so, what was it? How was that problem distributed into the internal team? Who resolved it? How it was resolved? And what was the end result? With that spectrum of information, there's a lot that you can do.
Yeah, that's the one thing I want to share with everyone. So we try to be more predictive to implement the predictive support to the spaces. So as you can see that there's a 2 line here. I'm so sorry, it's too small, but there's a couple months so that the customer calls service ticket more than we go to service the room. So, and then when we present the data and then the whole team, they realize that, oh, there's something wrong because they're not doing the work faster than the customer found out the problems. So that is a really good indicator to the people to see, for the team to look at their situation. And also, there's all the descriptions here. So to read couple thousand description is impossible. So, and then we develop a work map system here. They will automatically highlight the most repeatable keywords, let's say display, VGA, HDMI, so that we can really easy to navigate where is the most repeatable problems.
And this really helps us hone in on, all right, who's the problem professor out there?
Let me
Yes.
try to keep it. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it helps us hone in on who's the problem professor, who's submitting the tickets, and it's an opportunity to then, for the learning environments team to go do better end user support and training.
So do you guys do any preventative maintenance?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I would be curious to how that would tie into, you know, the different types of incidents that you guys have.
Yes, well, those are the kinds of things that we're looking at, right? Which is, can we correlate what the problem was to something else that was, is this a user problem or is this a technology problem? And oftentimes what we find is sometimes it's a space in between, but to your point, that's what we're really trying to get at is
Well, how often would you guys do those kind of checks?
on identifying how the maintenance correlates with the ServiceNow ticket.
So meaning that, you know, in order to prevent, say, a projector going down, that you're servicing, say, the bulb or the lens
Yes.
every so often, or, you know, things like that. Do you guys take any of those type of, we'll say, proactive approaches?
Yes.
Yeah, that
Instead of
definitely.
being reactive and sending somebody
Yes.
there to
That definitely.
find
That's
that out.
one story we can share with you, so that when we create a dashboard, and then we found out that a lot of classrooms, they turn on the projector overnight, and then we identify the problems during the meetings, and then with our engineers to schedule the shutdown at night, so that to kind of to fix the problem. So
Right.
without the data, it's really hard to find it out. Yeah.
Yeah, we had avoided all system shutdowns in the past because the moment you do that, there's always one person who needed to be there past a certain time and their system shut down on them. And that happened to us in a live case. And that happened also because the projector wasn't set up for the right time zone. And so it did shut off at midnight Central, which was still in session of a person. But to your point, you know, it's like looking at these pieces of how, one way that we answer that too is by our annual refreshes. So we get to a place of, well, lamps are a problem, we're going LED, and we're gonna get rid of all of the lamped projectors. That will remove one big pain point. It also removes the inventory of housing the lamps. There was a big cost perspective. And so we leverage the technology to help us in that support piece as well. So by having our standardization and a really simple design, we've eliminated a lot of what the potential problems in the technology could be. And to your point, it's just down to how then we use our staff to properly maintain. And maintenance is a relative term, really, in some regards. It's some rooms, you know, the projector may be higher to the ceiling. There's more heat in that room, so there might be more attention to certain pieces of equipment. Yes?
This is a microphone.
So you mentioned that you differentiate the different types of incidences that are reported in.
Yes.
What happens when you get a general report from like an instructor that says, I have an issue with the room? How do you sort that out or find that data?
Well, some of that comes back to you have to talk to people, right? So if a professor says, I have a problem with the room, well, then it's like, is it the environment? Is it the seating? Is it the technology? Is it the HVAC? What exactly is the problem? And so, because Chi and I, our purview isn't just the technology, it then comes down to space design. And so that's when that question comes in. It's like, we're constantly on this strive of how do we improve our spaces? How do we use users' feedback to help us better develop spaces? I mean, the challenge with some of us, a lot of us probably in this field, is marrying pedagogy with technology, and the pedagogy needs to drive the technology. But as technologists, we're often the ones that are here, we're excited looking at the technology, we're trying to push technology up, but the dialogue between the pedagogy side doesn't happen, and that can sometimes lead to miscalculations and misinterpretations of how the space is used and utilized. But generally, if a professor or a faculty member has a problem about the space and it's not a service ticket space, we sometimes get that information that'll come through our provost's office. Mm-hmm. The provost will say, hey, I heard from a professor, he went to his dean, this is now a fire, look at this space.
And also, because right now everything is on our ServiceNow database, we can using the name, the professor name or the room to search all the related history. And then I remember there's one scenario, there's one professor, they complain that the audio system is not working. And then our whole team have no idea. And then I look through the information and then I cannot find any records. And then we talk to the customer and then we found out that his laptop is really old. It's a 2010 Mac Pro and then haven't upgraded to the latest Mac OS X and then creates a lot of problems. So, but this is work. But the layer can help us to identify a lot of problems, can narrow down the situation. We can get a solution.
Yeah, so further on service tickets, this is a really interesting visualization because this shows you the case tracking and the incident resolution, who was assigned to it, and if they weren't able to resolve the problem, who did they hand it off to and who actually solved the problem. Now, this can be dangerous internally, right? Because you can start using this from management and go, I see you're not solving cases, or you're sending a lot of these off to somebody else. These are opportunities for training and education and to fill weak spots. And lets you do some rankings and ratings to better understand who your primary folks are. So this is really a very useful visualization. Event scheduling. God, this is so small. So here we're just able to identify, what's the top blue one say, Chi?
So this area actually is showing you which school, how many hours they're using our classroom to give you the bar chart to see the portion. Let's say seems like is engineering school and then our social science school, they're using a lot of classroom hours per our space. So we can identify which group of customer and then to see how we can provide better services.
Also, yeah, we're a very federated campus. And so in that federated campus environment, all of the schools are asked to pitch in dollars to the IT budget that supports classrooms. And what was always asked was, well, you got a school down here that has 50 classes a year and you have a school up here that has 10,000. Shouldn't those people put in more money into the pot than these people? So we've never really had a mechanism by which to have the provost's office better get a picture of who the core users of the space and the technology are, so they might be able to do some balancing on that side of it as well.
Yes, take questions.
Yeah, I was interested in how you pull the meeting data, whether it's like from Outlook or if it's from devices used in the room.
Oh, then actually we, hello? So actually we have different kind of data source to manage the classroom schedule. So we have at Astra to manage our 200 general use classroom, but some individual school they're using EMS, but also with the meeting space, we're going to use the Office 365. It depends, but we more focus on the classroom space. So in the future, we are working on a project to have a server can stitch all the schedules together, and then we can have a holistic view to see all the space usage.
Yeah, so if a class is scheduled, or something's scheduled and it's a no-show, how does that show up on your data?
Right now it doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, a lot of what we've done here, we have a multi-pronged plan that each year we sell a little bit more of it, that our infrastructure is at a place now. So let's start asking those types of questions. So as Chi just mentioned, primarily we're using Ad Astra for the registrar's office for our general classrooms, but we're starting to support a lot of conference rooms. That's going to be a different calendaring system. So how are we going to bring that in? So by selling that, we're able to do very well what we do with one side of it. It's building trust for the organization to say, great, you can move forward with that part of it as well. But when you come into it with, I have this idea where I want to bring in your schedule, sometimes it can create problems because oftentimes what we're doing requires other people to do other tasks, and they don't necessarily see the importance of that. So what we're doing is we're deriving the importance of all this stuff now, so that when we make the ask, we're coming in with dashboards and such, and they can clearly see where their data will plug in. So like I say, it's a process, not an event for us right now. Project cycles. We're tracking our life cycle patterns, project distribution, funding allocation, can tell you what we've spent in what fiscal year on what projects and what building and how many rooms. This information has been extraordinarily important for the provost's office. It really lets them see where their money's been spent. And from a strategic planning perspective, having these life cycle patterns really illustrates for everybody involved why it's important what we do. So it gives them a very solid visual platform by which to better understand some of the strategic plans that we're putting forward and why we're putting those plans forward. And it takes a lot of the debate and the discussion of explaining yourself. The data really, we end up explaining what the data is telling us, not justifying our project so much. So the project cycle data has been extraordinarily valuable from a funding allocation perspective. So this is what we had mentioned earlier. We had found recently that our learning environments team has an AV connector checkout process where a user comes in and they have their own device and they don't have the device connector that they need, so they come down to our office, they check out a connector, and they go back into the room. We were never capturing that data. That is just such huge data. So Chi, how long have we been, you got this, what, couple months? 3 months ago? When did we start integrating this AV connector checkout?
I think it's 2 months ago.
So we had this wealth of data in our own organization. We weren't even leveraging it. And now that we look at this data, it is stunning what it's telling us. It's like, really? So you can see from years, I think it's 14, 15, 16, what are the years?
So this one is 16, 17, 18, and 19. Actually, I have more data, but I just captured the most important things here. So this is a USB-C to VGA when we talk about, and then you see it's getting more and more. Because the people, this is the VGA to HDMI. So, and then you can see that the people get less and less right now because the technology is changing, though, right? The people get a newer laptop, newer technology. So, but very surprisingly, the USB-C to VGA is getting higher. So we don't know why. So
yeah, so then we need to go out and talk to people and better understand, what are you doing? Why are you, is it an application perspective that you're doing that, or is it an education perspective? Do you need better training, or is there some reason we're not fully aware of why you might do that? So this really gives us really important pattern and trend information that's helping us derive some very powerful insights. But this was being all collected on a Google, where do they collect?
Oh, so this is an internal database. Yeah.
Yeah, so Chi, we had to examine this database, and then Chi translated this data so that we have it. But if we had had this information a year ago in support of our cable project, it would have been a valuable piece of data. So for me, one of the things is we're always discovering new data sets and new data opportunities. You just got to start somewhere. It doesn't matter if you're perfect. It doesn't matter how great it is. But the exercise that we're going to do in a minute really starts with the base assumption that we all have one thing in common. If we're AV people, we control our AV data. Let's control that data. Let's get it wrangled in. Let's make some good meaning of it so that we can paint the picture that, imagine this data, now when I start piling on other data sets, it benefits those above us the most. So that's where we're really targeting our information. Yes?
Time.
Okay, so key insights. So the key insights that we developed were AV inputs and connector project validation, and we were able to get funding and execute that project. We demonstrated the use of new conferencing systems that we've deployed, and we're getting data for those conferencing systems. Project validation for obtaining future funding, and then opportunities for user outreach. So as an example, these are 4 key insights, and there are more that we could have brought to this table. But we developed these insights, and these are what we've been using as our engine. As Chi mentioned, we've added the wireless, ShareLink devices in rooms, and there was this question for a long time of, you got to put this technology in rooms. People need it, people want it, people want it. They want to connect wirelessly. We've put the technology in. In some spaces, it's not being used at all. In some spaces, it is. And so is it that they really wanted it, or is that they thought that they wanted? What is behind something people said that they want, we added it, and there's no data to support their usage? We don't have the answers to those questions, but all of us can have those types of question sessions every day of, this doesn't make sense. The data is a roadmap, it's a guide, it's not a solid answer for you. So we started with a 3-year timeline for our data project. It was the infrastructure, data collection and monitoring was our year 1, which we've completed. Kind of, still in the process of it. Our year 2 was really going to start bringing in now our video conferencing and our lecture capture usage, classroom scheduling, and really binding that information together, and then moving into next year with some staff scheduling and service ticket information and really binding it together. What Chi is doing now is we're not connected live to ServiceNow. We have to get reports, and then he has to translate and do the stitching. Because the ServiceNow team, we haven't developed the trust and the import yet for doing what we're doing and getting that live stream. But this process that we're going through is allowing us to build that trust. So we're anticipating that we'll have that live service ticket link within this year. Any other questions so far? Data analysis process. So really it comes down to this. You have to get raw data, you manipulate that data, you group that data, you visualize that data in dashboards, and then you do storytelling. The storytelling is the most fun part for me, because that's really where you have an opportunity with the power of the information, the data that you have, to tell any story that you want. So I'm also the council chair for the AVEXA Technology Managers Council. And we're going to be releasing today the technology strategic planning matrix that we've created for all of you folks. And it's a process that really kind of works along with this process, but it's about aggregating important information about key areas of your organization, translating that into some way that gives you data points that allows you to create elevator pitches. So that at any time, whether it's a short elevator ride or an absolutely tall one, you can give the state of your organization with an elevator pitching. Really, data is what allows you to build these little elevator stories and the larger stories that you can be very agile with.
So there's a couple story we would like to share with everyone. So there's the first one, there's a garbage in, garbage out. So when you want to do data analysis, how clean up the data is very important. So this is the story behind. So when I asked for the learning environments, hey, what is the check-in record? And then they just copy and paste a work file to me, and then, hey, gee, let's take a look. And they only have 46 records. And then, but I really doubt about the numbers. And then I go to the database, I extract 3,000 records, and then, then I can work. So, but also this is we need to communicate with the user because they do not have the idea of how data will look like. So after I share with them, they realize that, this is how important to look at the data now. So next. Yes. Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, clean data, actually, they just give me a work file. It's not a user-friendly to do data analysis. What I connect to the database, I export at least as a CSV file, and then I can work with, just like Excel file. So you can see that the garbage data, the single line represent one record, and then they do not have anything to break it. So how can I read it? So that's really tough. Yes?
Is it like a pivot table?
Hmm?
Like a pivot table?
So this is, we're using Power BI, we are not using Excel. So Power BI actually is very close to Excel. They're using the DAX, dynamic analysis syntax, to do the programming. Yeah. Okay, yes. So, and then also, we just highlight a couple little things. So room is very important for us because every single connection is using the room to identify this data set. And then also, when we first beginning, every single team they talking the room is a different way. So we mentioned, as Megan mentioned, that we have the buildings and then we have the room number. Some team they put data dash room number. Then some teams put data space number. Some teams put data without space and numbers. And then how we can connect everything together. So and end up we have a meetings. So to talk to every single team, hey, when you create your own document, let's say Excel file, can we follow our school standard to name the numbers? And this is the method 1. Method 2, I can do it on the back end. I break the numbers, I reconstruct it as the way it's supposed to look like. There's a second thing to do. And then divide is the same thing. So when you have a database, you make sure that you name your devices. The model numbers is the same. You don't put dash, don't screw it up, and then otherwise you will have same boxes, but you can see the 2 different records. Input location is the same thing. Next, Megan.
Yeah, and to build on what Chi is talking about here is, it's a challenge to get the data. So what we had to do the second time around is, let's not go too far downstream before we look at data. So we went through a process of saying, okay, we're going to have weekly meetings, we're going to look at it, and then say, nope, there's an error here. Because the problem that tends to happen is if you get too far downstream, cleaning that up becomes the same problem as you started with. So do iterative views of your data. Make sure if you're going to clean it up, you don't just assume, look at it. Because as Chi said, what we were finding is double records because just of syntax errors.
Mm-hmm. So also we kind of standardize our device as a device level. So you can see that there's a different inputs here. So we kind of name it in the same way. So that's very helpful. Yes.
Yeah, starting at this level is where data starts. You got to make sure you program properly at the device level.
So grouping. So when you collect a bunch of useful information, so then you can try to connect the information to break it down, and then you will find different dots, and then you can using dashboard and then data analytics technique to create some kind of dashboard, and then you can find out the pictures what we presented before. And then also you will find out the theme. So let's say when you try to deal with the input issues, when you try to deal with the usage issues, so you basically you can collect the related information to create your pattern. And then also we also question driven. So every single meeting, so when we have some problem we try to deal with, we look at all our available data sets and then try to create a dashboard to answer the questions.
You're just looking at this here, it's interesting because it shows HDMI is a 42.1% usage. Our VKC building has 22.44% of usage at that point, and Tuesdays specifically has the highest usage. So you can get down, and if we wanted to add to this, you could probably say, and it's the School of Social Work, and it's Professor X. So you can get really drilled down into that data, and it gives you some important intelligence. And from a room design standpoint, what Chi and I need to do is interpret some of this data. How do we relook at our spaces and how can we make their experience better? Mm-hmm. So again, our dashboards are about how do we develop your KPIs that we all need to deliver, do it in real time, interactive, while delivering very visual presentations. Our hope is that this dashboard, for instance, is up in our lobby at any given time in our AV office so that everyone can better understand from a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year perspective. And for myself, what's going to become really interesting, especially as there are discussions about brick and mortar schools and education patterns, where people go, we may see some interesting stuff over time that relates to how our spaces are getting used or not used anymore. But we don't even know what we're going to learn yet. This is the great part of the storytelling piece, is it's being written every day with the data that comes in. So from a storytelling perspective, convert data into story form, create a powerful narrative, engage your audiences, and then achieve your organizational goals through that process. Is that making sense for everybody? Who here is using data currently? At what level are you using data?
Very similar to how you use it right now. Inputs that the users are using, the time duration that they're using it in classrooms. We're also combining it with records reported both after hours as well as market value payments. We're cross-referencing basically found issues across the board.
Are you using that data internally as your team, or does it also go up?
Both. We use it internally to basically do process improvement or to change some of the practices we do. But then that data also gets sent up to management, and then they focus on different aspects of that data.
Great, so you do report your data up.
Yes.
Great. Anybody here want to share how they're using their data? Yes.
So we just brought up a new room reservation system.
Thank you.
We just brought on a new room reservation system, and we are co-located between two campuses, and we're going to move one campus to a different building, and we're trying to get an assessment of what types of rooms do we need to build in the space. So we're looking at room usage versus availability right now to help dictate that. We're eventually going to move more into is the room being used for the reservation it was booked for, and then expanding into hopefully what you're doing here on a device level.
Yes, and I heard some interesting piece from our folks at Harvard here about, bringing in some of the SIS information on top of that to correlate how many, it's a 20 classroom space, how many butts are actually in the seat? What the challenge that we all have is firewalls. And so SIS systems tend to be very difficult to get information from, so sometimes you want to find workarounds to illustrate and demonstrate how you might use that data, and then we'll give you the actual data. Why are you doing it that way? Because if I asked you the other way, you probably wouldn't have wanted to get it to us. So sometimes it's a really collaborative process by demonstrating those kinds of things, of coming in and saying, we're trying to do an assessment of X. Here are the data points that we've got, and that additional data point would be really great to, remember, we're doing this for our organizations. We're trying to make USC as an organization the best that it can be. And all of us providing the information gets us there. So I think we provide an extraordinarily valuable layer at our levels for what we do, because we touch and impact so many of the users that most administration will never touch and impact. And so we have a very unique opportunity to get empirical data and other forms of data that, how do we, there's other forms of data we still need to get out there. I'd love to get housekeeping data from a space. RMark going in. For me, a big piece of data is handwriting and handwriting analysis. How much are people using boards? How much time is being spent cleaning boards in between sessions? So there's a little project that I'm working on and considering working on right now that will address that piece of it, of really monitoring the writing process, because writing on boards represents a tremendous technology that most of us don't see every day. We don't see it as a technology, but the space, people are coming in, they're either going to use the technology, or they're going to use a board, or they're going to use both. So why aren't we capturing that important data? What might we learn from that piece of data? That's something we can talk about the next piece here. So the takeaways. Think big, act small. Because I always tell people that before you talk big data, you have to have small data figured out. You have to have a room working that you saw data coming from. So I've talked to a lot of people that say, I can't even imagine getting where you are, Megan. That's just too big. And it's like, well, you have a room. Start with a space. Start with a small collection of spaces. Get that data, hone in the data like Chia's been talking about here. Have it clean. And I assure you that once you pitch data up to those, and you begin to see things that you never knew were there, and it helps everybody along. So start if you haven't started. The takeaways: understand the state of your data architecture. Know what questions need to be asked and answered. Think big, act small, but start somewhere. Craft a powerful story with your data, and then use insights in all areas of your strategic planning. I think if there's the biggest takeaway for us, it's that I've learned that the storytelling piece is one of the most important things that we do as advocates for what we do. Making sure we tell those stories weaved with important information that we can back up is, at the end of the day, what is our revenue. So get data, work with your data. Any questions about what we've talked about here today? It's a small session. We've all had a lot of questions asked, so yes.
Do you guys have a specific, I know you mentioned it before, like your labeling process for the rooms and everything. Would you be able to provide that in a PowerPoint or anything? It's for like a starting point, or is that something?
I see. This is part of how, from a data labeling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the key thing what she was saying is that it's syntax, right? So every organization is going to be different. So for us, it's building and room number. But as was stated, is like, put 4 people in the room and they're going to enter that information differently. Caps versus non-caps, space, dash, no dash. How do we get conformity with everybody in agreement of how the base programming needs to be done to get that level of consistency? Check it to make sure we were all consistent, because even when everybody says, I pledge to be consistent, you look at the data and somebody just put a dash or put a space. Yes.
Questions here?
Can I
Bless
offer
you.
a suggestion on that front? Actually, before you start introducing naming conventions, see if somebody already has one. Chances are very good that your facilities people have some kind of space management system, and it probably
Yes.
already has a unique identifier for that room. So this is coming from someone who's trying to now reconcile our AV database, which has unique identifiers for all the rooms, with our Centerstone facilities database, which has its own unique identifiers for all the rooms. So if you can use someone else's schema and naming convention, do.
Yeah, and to your point, what we did is we standardized on the facilities capital construction nomenclature. However, it didn't come down to necessarily the dash, the space, no dash. I think some of that is still ambiguous. That's not policy. So, but to your point, how we name buildings and rooms, there is at least a commonality.
No
Yes.
questions here?
I was just going to say that you can, we used to use like a template. So once you typed everything in, it would put everything the same. So, no meaning like whatever way somebody did it, it just would automatically populate. And then you wouldn't have to, I guess, worry about that.
Yeah, well, the challenge can be because we have to program each IoT device with the data. And so this was it was a kind of a difficult process because we had to go back into each controller and update the data at the controller level to feed up. So it's going to be different for everybody, but I think, the theme everybody understands is the consistency and the continuity and the labeling will ultimately lead to your success. So insights from data. We want to do a little workshopping
one more
here.
question, Megan.
Yes.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
it's okay. Go
I
ahead.
can wait until after. But my question, you mentioned that you were possibly moving towards Fusion.
Yes.
Are you doing Fusion or XIO Cloud? Or-
Yes. Yes.
We can have a 2-hour
Yes.
conversation
Oh, okay.
about that after.
Yes, that's a big discussion. But we have already implemented an instance of Fusion, and one of the reasons is learning environments itself standardized on Extron long ago, and our rationale at that time was we don't need a Mercedes, we need a Jeep. We need to make sure with the 30,000 uses a year that the buttons get pushed and it doesn't break. And so that's why we stand on that platform. However, since Chi and I are branching out and servicing and supporting other spaces, and there are other constituents on campus who do use Fusion, and we're doing data, we wanted to take the leadership role in standing up the Fusion server that then gives us the baseline to go approach people and say, may we get your data? Because what we're doing is we're representing saying, no, we work for the university. We're making the university better. This is not AV data for learning environments. This data is going up to the CIO and the president level. So the more that the highest levels of the organization see the true reality of the mapping out there, the better. Yes, they'll see what we do, but that's a small picture. So what Chi and I are endeavoring to do is bring everybody in so that even all the federated independent schools that may have their own platforms, that we still with XIO and Cloud Infusion gather their data so that we can represent university-wide data. The medical school is only concerned with their platform.
But Megan,
Yeah.
according to my understanding, for XIO is more for the deployment
It is.
operation, but for the data collection, you need Fusion. So at the end, you probably need 2 platforms in your organization.
Yeah, because just because, I mean, it's the holistic piece of it, right? The XIO does allow you to do the distribution and the management of devices differently, but the Fusion is what is going to allow you to do the day-to-day, the data gathering in the way that is going to bring our data points, but the two do work together. However, a lot of institutions are doing just Fusing without the XIO. But we are looking at a holistic, full platform, UCC-based platform in that way. So what we wanted to do is at least just break the team up here, and we don't have a lot of people here, so this can be simplified, and we just wanted to do a little insights generating workshop. So again, the strategic planning through use of data gathered and from human intelligence along with IoT and other sources of data in support of design, operations, and support was our mission. So we were going to kind of run it like this, where we're going to put up some control data for y'all to look at. Review the data, AV data, discuss that amongst how we're going to break you all down here. And then we've created these little widgets here that are wildcards. These have data on them. This one, for instance, says staff. So with your control data and two wildcard pieces of data that you might pick up, in this case, so I just picked up camera and staff. If you had your AV data along with staffing data, along with your camera analytics data, what insights do you think you might be able to derive as an organization with those pieces of information? What our hope was is that if we have 4 small groups doing this and deriving insights, then we'll bring the insights together and say, and look at what a master insight might be about what we've gathered for data, and then just review that as some group sharing and then talk about that as a group. So if we can, what we had initially hoped to do was to say, well, there's going to be a bunch of people sitting here, bunch here, bunch here, bunch here, and you'll gather and have a master table. But since we only have 2, 4,
I think
6,
still 4 group is good.
8,
Yeah.
10, 12. So you could do 3 people per group, for instance, and discuss amongst yourself how you're currently using data, right? So it's just about what can you learn, what can you learn about the spaces, the users, what might you be more predictive on, what are some service items that may come up, and the process is these pieces along with the control data equals insight. So this is the AV usage data sample. So once we break the tables up, you can walk up and just take a look at this. So let's start with what wildcard data did you draw?
We had project and access.
Project and access, okay. And what did you guys draw? Camera and property, okay. Shame over here, they got shame and humiliation. And you guys took HVAC and help desk, okay? So interestingly enough, just organically, your insights where you could do
Programming updates and tie the room shutdowns to the calendar.
okay? And from, let me see here, just thinking outside the box. That's great. Okay, project and access. So programming connect. So what could you, with your AV data, project information, and room access information? Those are interesting ones.
Well, we thought when we saw the start time for when a button was pressed, midnight to 3 a.m., she let us know there might be some programming issues with reporting things incorrectly. So that's where we saw the programming correction. We thought access might be an issue if people were coming into the rooms.
Yes.
1 in the morning or 3 in the morning and leaving them on. Some of the rooms were on for 23 hours.
Yes.
And hitting the auto shutdown.
Yes.
Later. So we thought about tying the room operations into the room calendar. So it was the last meeting of the day the room was shut down.
Yes.
After that.
Well, and another thing for access is, for instance, we found on campus that during exam times, for instance, spaces are occupied by a lot of students that haven't reserved the space, but occupy the space. So that gives us really important intelligence maybe on, oh wow, we actually have to be here and supporting a space, even though there's no technology being used. Ad hoc, it might be being used. Spaces are being used in some regard and in some way. So that gives you some interesting information. And on project, once you start gathering your project information and balancing it year in and year out, it'll allow you to go, well, so with our AV, our access, and our project, what we're finding is We have technology out there. It's being used. It's being used in times we didn't anticipate. Should we perhaps, there's a project to be had out there that we can go to the provost's office about. We need to have staff longer than anticipated because there are people out there that we weren't anticipating, and there's a missed need. Our spaces, we go in and do a shutdown with our spaces at X time, but stuff was on. Why is that? We find that people are using it, so I may need to change my, as you say, program correction, right? I may change some analysis on my programming. So there's some interesting insights that you might derive from this that are above and beyond. I encourage you all to think beyond the technology. Think pedagogy, think organization, think overall operation, and how that might serve you to say, I want to pitch projects. How can that serve me? So thank you. And you guys draw. Okay. All right. Property and cameras. Wow.
Let's get them the microphone.
Okay.
Anyone want to share from your groups?
Yes, why don't you share some of your key findings?
Sure. Check 1, 2. No? So for the camera, we remember you guys talked about using them more as a support tool.
Yes.
And we really didn't see them. There may have been one instance of a camera on the list. So that's what we thought of for camera. And all the things that would go along with that. So just how faculty are using the instructional area, who are the presenters, does it take a long time for them to set up the room the way they like, is that causing issues for other instructors using the room later? And then for property, we kind of had two different thoughts on that. One was just what equipment is in whatever building.
Yes.
And then also you could track usage by room and zone as well too, because we noticed you had
Yes.
some zones consisted of multiple buildings, so you could track usage by that way. Did I miss anything, guys?
I just wanted to build that the camera provides quite a bit of observation data.
Yes.
There's virtually limitless right there. So in addition, it's how are they using the technology? Is it in the way to, what's the transition, as you mentioned, but also, are they bringing in their own things? Like the last bullet, who is the user who's presenting? Is it more student presentations? Are they bringing guest presenters?
Yes.
And are they bringing in devices and doing things that we didn't think of, like bringing in an Apple TV so they could walk around wirelessly?
Yes.
Which actually I know it has been done, but so it's just limitless. That's why we had so many bullets.
Great. Well, building on that, when we this year had a project where we have to replace displays that are used for side viewing, but by actually looking at the cameras, my argument is we've wasted our money because those displays are never being used as they were designed and intended. And we're moving forward with the project because to not move forward kind of creates some other problems that are logistic and some other things, but the camera intelligence definitely tells us that they're not using the technology as it was designed and put in. So, what does that tell us what we can do with that? And a funny story on the cameras. So I've been at USC since 2001. I've been collecting images from our cameras since 2001. I literally have probably a couple 100,000 images. I can show you hundreds of images of one laptop in an auditorium of 300 people in the early 2000s, and that same auditorium over the years where there's one person without a laptop. That gets into looking at those trends and saying, hey, we need to propose a project of putting power at least in every other seat. Well, how are we going to support these devices? And so those are the kinds of powerful trends that we can bring to the table. That goes back to you on project, right? So you might look at some of this stuff through cameras or some of these other elements and go, no, there's a capital construction project that needs to be proposed because it supports the users who are supporting technology. You can't move forward the project, you have to just pitch it to the right people. But that's a great case of how that can work. So thank you for your insights, really wonderful. Transition between classes, monitoring that's really powerful. The activity in hallways, how are hallways being leveraged and utilized. We see a lot of spaces that are these empty, dark spaces. We actually been noticing that for years, and we're like, why isn't there any furniture there? People are paying $100,000 a year to go here, and they're sitting on the floor. There's no power. And so we finally made that pitch. This last year, we added furniture in some key areas, and we look at our cameras, and it's amazing. It's amazing to watch them use that furniture, and it's amazing that there was nothing ever there before. So you can get some, I'm sorry?
I was going to say, put a charging station somewhere with some chairs.
Correct, and then monitor that and watch it. And at the end of the day, we're all about delivering user experiences. And so delivering a user experience in a holding area where kids are sitting may not be a classroom, but it supports our classroom. And only we are providing that insight as AV people. So leverage that. Okay, we have 5 minutes.
All right, so-
Okay, your guys' insights were interesting because you brought a piece in just about student information systems. And I hadn't almost considered that yet because it's, that's a tough ask.
So what we were talking about actually before we got started was I've been doing some data analysis. It's been more from the planning side, so more from the capital projects and thinking about how we're prioritizing different kinds of classrooms, and discovered that no one had ever really looked at the way that the enrollment patterns, right, so how many students are in our classes, matched up to the classrooms that we had. So this is really about seats and classrooms, and there's a woeful mismatch between the number of very small classes that we have on our campus and the number of classrooms that are the right size to support those, and that has all kinds of other implications. So it's really tactical kind of data analysis, but has helped influence now planning. Anytime we're looking at a building, we're saying, oh, can we tuck in some smaller classrooms instead of that, open space, or instead of, another sort of less optimal medium-sized classroom. Maybe we drop a wall there instead, and it's two nicer small classrooms.
Yes, because conventional wisdom may say something else.
Oh, we must have
but you
bigger rooms, more seats from our registrar. And we're like, actually, no. You
Right.
only have
Yes.
a small proportion of your courses that need those rooms, but your nice big rooms are being taken up by the smaller classes.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Super fun.
And it's really important to note is that oftentimes these insights that we're talking about, there's nobody else in the organization making these correlations because they don't care about us in our field. I don't say that in a derogatory sense, but AV, I used to say, I've been in AV for 35 years. We are not the bottom of a totem pole. We're often the ground underneath the bottom of the totem pole. That's not considered and thought, but we're a foundation. And we really are more important than oftentimes they even recognize. We've just never really had a good mechanism to tell those stories and really bring our importance to the table. And data can really elevate that importance for you. What about you guys?
The last group.
We had a help desk and HVAC.
I guess one thing through just discussing things was that our perspective of how what data comes from help desk and HVAC and how it relates to each other differs depending on our scale.
Yes.
So for me, in university and stuff, our help desk kind of gets a lot of reports for HVAC because our number is the first thing listed in the room. So
Right.
they call us for everything.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
HVAC is also important for us for our AV stuff to make sure that our equipment doesn't bake inside rooms.
Yes. So when you get contacted on the help desk and they call and say, there's no napkins in the room, do you capture that data?
Usually we do, but we also send it off to the appropriate department as well.
Yes.
But we keep track of it because it is a common thing we get, so it is part of something that, well, it counts as a call that came in, so we still treat it the same way as any other issue we get.
Yeah, and look, from an AV space design perspective, oftentimes we're also doing furniture, and in the environment, you say, we got a lot of data that showed, for instance, the trash cans in these rooms are so small, there's always overflowing because it's a 20-seat classroom, but SIS data shows that it's 22 people. It's always freaking hot in the room. The camera shows me that people are sitting outside. We really need to propose a project that is about possibly looking at the temperature in the room, talking to Aramark about how they're cleaning the spaces, and bringing in capital construction to talk about what we're learning. And so this all weaves together. Yes?
Yeah, my thing is I just still think that one's technology and one isn't. So to
Well,
me,
that's
like
true.
help desk is somebody's reaching out because there's a problem because you have a technology failure. Where I don't think HVAC is essentially the same thing.
Yeah,
That'd
but
be my
we
only
do
takeaway
get
from
calls.
that.
We get calls
No,
a
I
lot,
know.
right? They say this room's it's too hot in here. We then, to your point, contact facilities, right?
But that device is on the network.
Well,
That's
the other
what
thing
it
too,
We're tapping into our Honeywell systems.
It's all OT, OT and AV and.
well, like his scale is much larger. His is a national scale, so his
Yes.
HVAC would differ depending.
Well, exactly. Yes, it depends by location. And then for you, it's an interesting thing. If you say you're multi-location, right? It's like, well, isn't that interesting? I have these great patterns that show me with HVAC. We have no issues over here. Everything is awesome. But isn't this interesting? We're correlating. Didn't even look at this until I looked at the HVAC data. Now these other problems start making sense. So look, it's not that it may not weave a big story for you. It gives you just another piece of a narrative that helps empower you in your full spectrum of decision making. When we're talking about space design, especially enterprise-wide space design, there's so many factors. Then why we put out so many of these data points is that everyone here is going to have different data points at different scales. And so somebody here may have all of these data points. Somebody here may have 1 or 2 data points, but I'm trusting that everybody here has AV data. So use that as your base data, find as many data points, continue to question yourself and go, what would I learn if I got that data? And then start asking for data. Until you look at it and contextualize it, you'll never understand the importance of it. So let's take a look at the survey that you guys filled in, which is pretty interesting. So we're pretty split. The majority of you are all using data, which is really fabulous. A good third are not, and some maybe. So there's a tremendous opportunity here that there's a very small portion of our universe out there is actually really using the data. So that's really awesome. Do you combine with other data? Maybe.
25%.
Right?
So hopefully after this workshop, you have better insights. You can go back to see how any opportunity to combine with other data. So next one will be how long have you been using data to define insights? This
is really great because at the end of the day, we're in an infancy in what we do within this organization with data, and there's not a lot of people in this room. In the future, I suspect that presentations that are based on data will have more people because it's our revenue, it's our ROI. I used to say at our university, the only feedback that we get, our feedback mechanism is the lack of feedback. The fewer people complaining, the fewer people calling is what makes people say, I'm not even caring about you guys. You're not a problem point for me. You're not a pain point. You're too awesome. So how many spaces do you support? Oh, this is a good one.
This is a good one. So yes, there's 2 people supporting more than 1,000 spaces.
Are you doing more than 1,000? Yeah. What do you do?
Work for an integrator and we support a bank.
Got it.
Cool.
Awesome.
So 33%.
Like conference rooms and.
Conference rooms, help desk, break fix.
Yes.
All different types of stuff.
Great. So, but on average, it looks like our, about 10 to 50 spaces seems to be,
about 10 to 200.
Split between, you're either doing 10 to 50 or you're doing 200 plus.
Yeah. All right. So the next one. How big of your team?
How many people in your IT design technical team?
So 1 to 5 is a 55%, and then they're very even. So
That's a hard question to answer. Because where are we drawing the boundaries there?
Yes.
Are we playing with the design and like engineering, or are we going?
Yes. Experientially, myself, having been in this industry for a long time, I know that most of us are understaffed, under-resourced. We do a lot with very little that spans everything from technical design all the way to architectural design. So it's a pretty broad field. Who uses the data?
Everyone do share their information. That's very cool. So 100% of people will share with their internal groups. 87 is shared to the management, executive 50%, and then one.
Who shares with client? Who put these shares with client?
Okay.
That's really great because we don't do a lot of sharing with clients based on what we're doing now, but that's a new potential opportunity of how we could potentially, as an output with our I'm just making this up, with our users, every year we do some form of a data output to the users of our spaces that gives them sort of like a measure and a ranking of how they were last year. We can benchmark. That'd be an interesting piece. Thank you.
So
What AV systems are you using?
Crestron is the top one, and then we'll be going to Extron and then AMX. The last, just this is open questions.
What are some ways to show impact on our communities? I don't have this, but just a dribble where it could be a waterfall. Fusion is under-levered. Yeah, so I think this is a really, really great point of even the smallest data sets right now can go a very long way. And once you start working with it, you'll recognize the importance of that data, of gathering all these other pieces, and it's just the beginning. So really, I encourage you all to leave here today knowing that I'm really encouraged that those that are here are exploring, using at some levels. I think we're going to become the evangelists and those that are really activists for the use of data and advocating for ourselves on campus. And really from a strategic planning perspective, how do we, from AVIXA on down, in our organizations, really know that this data is as important a component to our trade as projectors, as displays, as lighting. Because in the end, if we can't demonstrate the usefulness of those pieces, our funding is much difficult to get. So thank you all very much for attending. If you have any final questions or any other questions, we're more than happy to chat with you afterwards. And thank you for participating. Thank you.